Proverbs 22:7 says, "The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." We previously discussed the reality that to borrow money isn't in and of itself a sin, but there was more that needed to be said, so we pick up where we left off, and we start with this warning. We must be very careful about borrowing, because even when it's necessary, it's the sort of thing we call a necessary evil. It's sort of like amputations. Of course, it'd be evil to just cut a man's hand off or his foot or any other body part, but a doctor may do so because gangrene may set in, and if you don't cut that part of the body off, then the blood will be poisoned and the person would die. So the evil of amputation becomes a necessary evil, and you actually pay the doctor a huge amount of money for cutting that body part off, and you thank him for saving your life. That's why we admit that borrowing for a house or a car, even educational training to an extent, and even other things, in some cases it's necessary, but it still makes the borrower a servant to the lender in some respects. But in some countries, you have to be especially careful, because if you don't pay back what you borrow, you literally become a bondservant. A lot of Americans don't realize that debtor prisons were formally abolished here in America in 1833, but before that, and for all of human history, failure to pay back what you borrow could land you in prison. And in much of the world, the man you owed money to could sell you, and could sell your whole family into indentured servanthood. That's what Jesus described in his parable about the kingdom of heaven, when the man who owed 10,000 talents, which was an unpayable amount of money. It's like, saying it's millions of dollars. But Jesus is pointing out that we can't pay for our sins, and that's the main point he's making there to getting into the kingdom of heaven. But when he refers to this man who couldn't pay back the 10,000 talents in Matthew 18:25, Jesus said, "But for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made." That was a parable, but it was based in historical reality. And that's why the best policy taught in the Bible, in those days especially, was to remain as debt-free as possible. Another example is Paul in his simple instructions of Romans 13:8. "Owe no man anything, but to love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law." Owe no man anything. I believe this is talking about personal debts, and doesn't prohibit careful, wise loans for transportation, housing, and other matters of business. Getting a loan from a bank isn't the same as owing money to a person, like a family member or a friend. As a matter of fact, I haven't borrowed money from a personal friend in more than 35 years because I learned a hard lesson about how unwise it is to do that. And I don't have a lot of money to lend, but I would never lend money that I couldn't live without if it weren't paid back. Under the ideal circumstances taught by Jesus in Luke 6:35, he said we would lend hoping for nothing again. In other words, don't even expect anything to come back, and just look for repayment when we get to heaven. But again, we're not there. We're not in heaven yet. So be wise in the matter of borrowing and lending. It's true that thanks to modern bankruptcy laws, you're not going to face debtor's prison for unpaid debts. But as we read in the previous devotional, the psalmist says in 37:21 that the wicked borroweth and payeth not again. So we don't want to be among the wicked who run up debts with no intention or no real effort to pay back our debts. If you happen to do that, you ruin your testimony, you destroy relationships, burn bridges, so to speak, and you find yourself untrusted and worse for the wear if you're careless and don't pay your debts.